If I can't keep my head held high enough, I'll just speak love and watch the smiles come, bring my spirits up. There's some shit I like to fix, but I still know that I'm blessed.
Welcome back to my coverage of the Kristin Smart case. We do have a small update regarding Paul today, November 21st, 2022, in the evening hours. This is regarding his sentencing date, which is scheduled to occur less than 3 weeks from today. But Paul's defense attorney filed a motion to delay sentencing. We're all ready to hear Paul's sentencing following his October 18th, 2022 guilty verdict. Most of us want to get on with it and to think about Paul as little as possible. We expected to have that phase of this nightmare behind us on Friday, December 9th, 2022 at 9 a.m. in the Monterey County Superior Court in Salinas, California, which is where the hearing was scheduled. The motion to continue the sentencing did not even list a specific date, just a date later than December 9th. The motion is scheduled to be heard Friday, December 2nd, 2022 at 9 a.m. in the Monterey County Courthouse. According to the protective order filed by the court, a revision now prohibits those still involved in Paul's case from discussing any details that were not presented at trial with the public. Rubin spoke out just moments after his acquittal on the courthouse steps with his attorney, Harold Misick. The revisions were made soon thereafter. Speaking of Mr. Misick, he already spilt the tea about Sanger's plan to file an appeal on Paul's behalf. We can probably assume the delay is connected to that somehow. I wish it could just be over. Let's hear from Funky Baloo, who's a respected local attorney who I featured on my show multiple times. He's going to give his expert opinion regarding Paul's expected appeal. This is from a local radio station show that he showed up on called Up and Adam in the Morning. So let's take a listen.
Is that I am very confident that Paul Flores' case will be reversed.
Stop it. I got to get to that in a second. Hold on. I want to ask you about this first. Yesterday, Rubin talked to the press for like 5 minutes or so outside the courthouse. He's a pretty simple guy. Like, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of there. He kind of speaks like Yoda a bit. First of all, would you have let him do that after that, like that? I think there's like some adrenaline that must move through the winner, move through the lawyer for a victory. And I wouldn't have let Rubin talk like that. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Would you have let Rubin do that like 5-minute press conference outside the courthouse?
Well, the trial is over. They can't retry him. He's subject to double jeopardy. I would have left it up to my client, and if Rubin wanted to vent a little bit after years of silence, I would have left it up to him. It's not my call.
Did Rubin Flores ever come to you or shop you out, call you at all?
No.
What about Paul Flores?
No.
Would you have taken the case?
All I can tell you is that yesterday my wife was grateful that I had nothing to do with those cases.
Yeah, that's true. Happy wife, happy life. Let me ask you very candidly, this Sanger guy, I mean, he's had some really high-profile clients, much success, but watching him throughout was kind of sad. He wasn't very impressive, like, at all. Has he kind of jumped the shark, or his best days of litigating behind him? Were you surprised at his performance and ultimately the result?
Well, I agree with you. I agree with you in the sense that he's been around a long time, done some high-profile cases. But in all fairness to him and the truth, I never observed his performance. It was only related to me by observers like you or other people who told me third-hand versions of what you just told me. So I can't join the chorus without having first-hand knowledge.
I just can't see someone as sharp as you, Elon. Like, if you get to a point where you're, fumbling little things like that over and over, I don't know. When you see someone like who's known as a as a big time defense attorney, and they just, kind of eat it like that. It just, I don't know. I don't know. Do you want to retire before that as a defense attorney? Or do you go right till the very end? Like F. Lee Bailey style. Like, what do you do? How do you look at it?
Well, no. If you're ineffective, you retire. If you've lost the passion, you retire.
Yeah. Why do you think he has a good chance at appeal? I'm amazed by that.
It always, and I've mentioned this before, I don't know whether it was to you or to someone else, and I talked to a couple lawyers yesterday, frankly, and we all had the same thought. And it's as follows. There's no way in God's green earth will a jury acquit anyone charged with anything when they hear that he's been that 10, 15 years after the alleged offense, he engaged in 2 rapes. I understand there's a basis to admit that kind of evidence, but there has to be a signature, some common thread between the charged offense of murder and the theory of murder and the rapes that the court allowed to be introduced in the trial. When I heard that the court allowed the evidence of the 2 rapes, it was a fait accompli, as the French say. There's no way. And in the Rubin's case, he's an old man. Maybe they felt sorry for him. But who's going to acquit? What 12 tried and true are going to acquit a man of murder when the DA says that his intent when he committed murder was to rape someone, and then introduces evidence 10, 15 years later of 2 other women who testify under oath that the same person raped them?
I wonder if it's just like they're trying to prove like an MO. They're trying to prove like this is what this guy does. He drugs women. He takes advantage of their inebriation.
I'm okay. I'm totally okay with that, and the law is totally okay with that. But there has to be some signature, some common thread between the charged offense and the rapes. And all we have in the homicide is that he was the last person seen with her, and there's some evidence that she was in his room at Cal Poly, and there's some evidence that she was buried next to his parents' home.
And there's eyewitness evidence that she was in the same state as these other women are right before Paul rapes them.
Well, just because you're in the same state doesn't mean that there's any kind of rape going on afterwards. I mean, that's pure speculation.
Yeah, you got the dogs placing her in the bedroom, I think. I don't know. I think you're right. It's circumstantial. Yeah.
There has to be some evidence of a rape, and you may place her in a room, but that's not a common signature of a rape. There has to be a common signature between the rape with Kristin Smart, allegedly, and the rapes between the 2 women. And there's no evidence that a ball was ever used with Kristin Smart. There was no evidence that he ever drugged Kristin Smart. There's no evidence that he had sexual intercourse with Kristin Smart. There's just no common thread. And so anyway, that's my serious reservations with the verdict.
So you think that's enough to say, like, that's going to be what Sanger plays, and that might have enough teeth to warrant some sort of either an appeal or relooking at this case?
There's no doubt that's going to be a major argument on appeal.
Well, look, it's good insight because I know you know what you're talking about, but it's not news I'm happy to hear. I want this to stay the way it is. And just like, we got Elon Funky Bilu, defense counsel. He is up and at him in the morning. And we got Elon Funky Bilu, defense attorney. Can you see the acquittal of Ruben Flores in some way, anyway, directly, indirectly, helping the appeal of Paul Flores?
Yes, because, again, in weighing prejudice, when judges weigh prejudice, they can look at the entire case. The rape evidence was not used against Ruben Flores. He was not the rapist, and it's conceivable that Ruben Flores' jury impliedly might have found that Paul murdered Miss Smart, and they still could have acquitted him based on the fact that there was not enough evidence to support an aiding and abetting charge.
Yeah.
It also could be construed that the jury was not as fazed by the rape evidence because he was not the rapist, and they were not as prejudiced against Ruben as they were against Paul.
Because of the rape evidence against Paul, right? Got it. Okay.
Right.
Interesting stuff. So, Paul, do you think he did it?
Do I think
he did it? Yeah. Like if you take your lawyer hat off, you're just your Elon gut check. Do you think Paul did it?
Let me say this publicly. let me say this publicly. Thank you for asking for my opinion, but my opinion is worth as much as the rear side of my body. It's not worth anything, and because I don't have all of the evidence before. I don't have 25, 26 years of evidence to give Adam Montiel an honest, reasonable, professional opinion whether he did it or not. But I'll tell you this: there's certainly enough evidence to convict, but there's certainly enough evidence to acquit. But it's a much more difficult case to convict without the rape evidence.
Elon Funky Bilu answered like a true champ. He outsmarts me every time. Ah, man.
Wow, I wasn't expecting that. How ironic that the helpful heroic doe's testimony could be grounds for appeal, according to Funky. I don't quite understand how that would work, knowing the testimony was entered as evidence under California court rules. Who knows what grounds Sanger will use for appeal? We'll have to wait and see. Doesn't make me happy, that's for sure. I wonder how Paul will pay for the new trial. His home in San Pedro already has a lien on it from the first trial, and last we heard the title may have been cloudy due to name discrepancies. Oh, I wish this part of the nightmare was over. Now, before I change gears to the next subject, I want to preface something as far as Jennifer Hudson, who testified against Paul and told the court how Paul told her he had killed Kristin. I can't say if she was truthful, confused, or lying. There's no way for me to know that. But I can say I was worried about how the jurors would take her testimony. So far, only one juror has even spoken, and it was one of Ruben's jurors, and he said he didn't believe Jennifer. He was concerned about her testimony, and frankly, so was I. Either way, Paul was found guilty, so it all turned out okay. Ruben was found not guilty, although I've expressed it multiple times. Paul was my biggest concern. Jennifer did an interview after the guilty verdict, and here are some of the highlights and extras we didn't already know. She poses in photographs with her adorable little boy for the coverage in this article, but I'm going to exclude him from the photographs. I'd rather leave him out of it. Okay, let's hear from witness Jennifer Hudson now. The headline reads, quote, "Scared I was next," end quote. The woman who Paul Flores confessed to murdering Kristin Smart reveals his chilling admission and why she kept secret for so long. As we all know, Jennifer testified that Paul confessed he murdered Kristin in 1996, and she says she was terrified she'd be next, so she kept quiet for over 2 decades. She was already afraid, and then ran into Paul again weeks later after the first conversation. At the site, Paul claimed he buried Kristin. She said she immediately scrambled back into her truck in a panic and drove away. She was terrified and actually vomited. She said dark thoughts crept in that he would harm her. She even thought about some of the details. She said she thought to herself that he did this to Kristin, who was 19, while Jennifer was only 17 at the time, and Kristin was on campus with others. What could he do to Jennifer? She wondered. In her head, Jennifer said she didn't want to end up like Kristin. She said, quote, I was not going to entice this monster to come after me by going to the police. End quote. She further went on to explain, quote, I just wasn't going to do it because if I did and it wasn't enough to arrest or charge him 100%, I would have been next. That's what I was thinking. Looking back, maybe that was a bit paranoid, but I think it was a rational fear too. End quote. Jennifer said she didn't tell a soul for 6 years until finally, during a drunken night in 2002, when she said she decided to relieve herself of the burden, which was still weighing heavy on her mind. She told her close friend and roommate, Justin. We, of course, also heard from him in court as well. Jennifer said they were both drunk, and she would tell Justin anything, and she figured he'd take it to his grave. It was a short conversation, she said. She told Justin how scared she was, and she made him promise never to tell anyone, which he agreed. When Justin tried to bring it up the next day, she said, quote, I did a motion with my hands telling him to zip up his lips. He did, and after that, we didn't speak of it again. Jennifer said her silence quietly ate away at her. It was easy for her to keep quiet since her life depended on it. It was hard to live with herself knowing, though, that she was contributing to the Smarts' pain. When she gave birth to her son, the true magnitude of her silence was realized. She said, quote, it wasn't until I had my son, becoming a mother, and growing another human inside me, that I realized my next breath depends on his, and knowing that he's safe. She said, quote, my next breath doesn't happen if my son's doesn't, right? After giving birth, she thought a lot about it, trying to reconcile. She said, quote, in my head, I started picturing my baby as Kristin and how her parents must have been over the moon that they were bringing home this perfect little human. The article notes Jennifer is crying as she continues. She says, quote, then just one day, Kristin was gone. Jennifer admires the Smarts' resolve and restraint and said she'd have held someone at gunpoint to get information if her son was missing. She admits that she was responsible for the suffering of the Smart family, but knew what she knew wasn't enough evidence. She said Paul was the catalyst, but she also felt responsible. She told Detective Cole that when she met with him. She told him that she felt like a piece of shit for not saying something sooner. She said, quote, now that I'm a mom, I can't imagine how these people have gotten out of bed every single day, living a parent's worst nightmare, end quote. She wonders if she would have come forward sooner, if they might have found Kristin sooner, out there in Wasna, where Paul said he had put her. She still struggles with those questions and those what-ifs. It's hard for her to think about. Next section of the article was titled Vindication. Seeking to make amends with the Smarts, Jennifer testified against Paul. She no longer cowered in fear over Paul harming her. She said she relished staring him in the eyes from the witness stand. She said his eyes were as dead as she remembered them being 26 years ago. She said, quote, it twisted in my belly to see him again, but my fear was extinct, and I was no longer afraid of him, end quote. She also said, quote, I made the decision that every time I wasn't looking at his attorney, I'd stare at him, end quote. She felt some level of vindication as she stared him down, as he was forced to sit there and listen in silence. She said she was elated at Paul's verdict and being able to help bring justice to the Smart family. Jennifer acknowledges it's not over without Kristin's body being recovered. When asked what she'd do differently, she said she would have gone to the cops and immediately bought a gun. Very interesting interview. I don't really have anything to add. Tell me your thoughts on all this in the comments below. And I'm going to mark my calendar, of course, for the next hearing coming up Friday, December 2nd, 2022 at 9 a.m. So I'll be sure to bring you all the updates. Take care, everybody. And, of course, hashtag find Kristin Smart.
If I can't keep my head held high enough, I'll just speak love and watch the smiles come.
Thanks for watching.
Bring my spirits up.
Don't forget to stop and smell the flowers.
There's some shit I like to fix, but I still